joining me. This is a new video series that I'm putting together on how to knit. I had the idea for this video series a couple of months ago, but I just haven't really gotten around to getting it all together. But here I am. I wanted to rush these videos out fairly quickly because I know a lot of people are home right now and aren't able to leave their homes. So I thought, this might be a nice opportunity to provide some people who are kind of bored right now with a new hobby to learn. I know there's a lot of videos out there already on how to knit, but the focus of my series is really going to be on beginner and basic knitting. I will add more advanced techniques as I go on, but I wanted to get these beginner options out there as soon as possible so that people can start using it and have something that might bring a little joy to people in kind of harder times right now. So what I'm going to be focusing on in the first probably 3 or 4 videos that I'm going to put out are the basic beginner stitches, what you need. I also want to provide an option for people who may not be able to leave the house right now or who may not be able to order supplies right now. And that option is going to be using household items that you can at least learn how to knit on. This would also be a good project if you have kids who are home right now and are looking for something to occupy their time. So what that project is going to focus on is using stuff that you have around the house that you may be able to then adapt to at least learn how to knit with. It may not make the most it may not make the most aesthetically pleasing project, but it's something that you can do. You can learn with it the same as if you are able to buy supplies. So the first thing that I want to talk about today are going to be your options for knitting needles. So knitting needles come in a wide variety of options. The most common is going to be aluminum knitting needles. Aluminum knitting needles are probably the most these are the most popular, I would say, for traditional knitters. This is going to be the most common knitting needle you're going to see. I think they were really the only option when people, started knitting mainstream. This was the main commercial option that you had. I don't know if that's actually historically accurate, but I'm just saying it. So do the research, let me know in the comments what the real truth is. But anyway, so these are aluminum knitting needles. These I think are 14 inches, but I don't have a tape measure right on me to measure them. So these are size 9, 5.5 millimeter aluminum. The next option that I have are plastic needles. These are also size 9, 5.5 millimeters. So plastic is actually pretty popular lately. So you may find just as many plastic options at the craft store as you'll find aluminum options. Plastic is a little bit lighter. They flex more though. So if that's a concern to you, they're more, they're not necessarily breakable and you're gonna snap them in regular use, but you might if you're knitting in a really tight fabric. I could see that becoming kind of an uncomfortable thing. They're lighter, so there's a little less strain on those if you have wrist or joint pain in your fingers, arthritis, elbow pain. The aluminum ones may be a little bit heavier and more of a burden on those on that kind of pain than what you would get with the plastic. And a lot of the larger size plastic needles, I think they might be hollow too. There's some really lightweight ones. So if that's a concern for you, if you have any kind of wrist or joint pain or anything, you may want to consider getting a lighter weight needle, especially if you're doing a big project. So those are 2 straight needle options. I also have a circular option, and the circular option is in bamboo. So this is a clover bamboo needle, and with bamboo it's softer, so the yarn holds on to the material a little bit a little bit tighter, I guess, so it doesn't slip off as easily, whereas with your aluminum and the plastic it's a little bit more slippery, so the yarn can, if you're not careful, slide off those needles. With the bamboo, I mean, it can still slide off, but it holds on to them a little bit better. These are circular needles. You can use circular needles the same way that you use straight needles. So even though you're knitting something flat, as in you're not making a tube, which is what circular needles are intended for. So even though you're not making a tube with them, you can still knit something flat, like a scarf, bandana, you know, anything that you might want to sew later. Whereas circular needles, you can't, or straight needles, you can't knit something in the round on a circular needle. So these are more versatile. But if you never plan on learning how to knit in the round, you don't need circulars. If you think you are going to want to advance and progress to that, you can start out with a pair of circulars. And in the cast on video at the end, I will show a show casting on the circular needles so that you can still learn that way. But it is a little bit tricky, a little more tricky to learn how to do, and it can be confusing when you're a very beginner, but I'll still put it on the end if you feel adventurous and you want to give it a shot. So that is circular needles and bamboo, and these are also 5.5 millimeter size 9 needles. So these needles are all the same size, and I will put I'll put links in the description with the online links to purchasing needles, the straight needles from like Amazon. So I also wanted to give an option for people who are stuck at home, who don't have the money for knitting needles or supplies, who don't have the ability to go out to the store, who who can't order off of Amazon right now because of shipment delays. I want you to be able to start this, you know, the same day if you want to. So for you guys, I have the option here of using chopsticks. So this is really going to be something that you can use to learn on. It's not going to be super consistent in your final project because chopsticks are tapered, whereas knitting needles, they're only tapered at the point and then they're the same width throughout. So this isn't going to be, you know, something that you can use for something you want to be consistent. It's not going to be consistent. Your stitches are going to vary along the width. And I would say to use it for bigger yarn. The project that I would recommend doing with these is going to be using t-shirt yarn, something that you can DIY at home with an old t-shirt. And then what you'll do is use your chopsticks for it. You can make a dishcloth. This is t-shirt is generally 100% cotton, so you can use it to make dishcloths. You can use it for pot holders because it's going to be kitchen safe to use and throw in the washing machine. You don't have to worry about a more sensitive fiber type that you can't wash. You can beat the heck out of this and it will be totally fine to throw in the washing machine, to throw in the dryer. You can use high heat. So this is also something you can DIY, make at home, and chopsticks are something you can get in your delivery, or you may have a big drawer of them. But if you're using like delivery chopsticks, for example, you may want to kind of sand them down in case you're worried about splinters, especially if kids are using them. But again, like I said, you can also use colored pencils that are coated, as long as you kind of sharpen and give them a tip on them. You don't need them to be too sharp. These kind of match the plastic needles I have as far as the bluntness of them goes. So you don't really need to worry too much about making it like a really fine point. So moving on, I want to talk a little bit about the different yarn types. So for this video, I'm going to be using worsted weight yarn. Worsted weight yarn is kind of the standard, it's also known as number 4. It's medium yarn. This is kind of the trusty yarn that will get you through. Any projects can be made with this. You can make a sweater with worsted weight. You can make socks with worsted weight. They'd be more like slippers probably, but worsted is definitely one of the most common yarn types. This will be super easy to find at the craft store. You really won't have to worry too much about locating worsted weight yarn. I will put a link in the description for a basic like $2.99 ball worsted weight yarn. This particular one I believe is Lion brand, Vanna's Choice. It's super soft, and it comes in a ton of colors. I think the one I'm gonna link is Lion brand Basic Stitch, or Stitch Basic, whatever. It's called something like that. So yarn will come in a, this is like a commercial skein, how it's wrapped. You can knit from this, or you can wind it into a ball like that. When you're looking at yarn in the store, if you go, or online, don't go to the craft store right now, but when things calm down, if you do go to the craft store, I just want to show you, you'll see the label for the yarn. It's going to be packaged like this. On the label, you'll see it's going to have the size of the yarn. It's going to say worsted. It's going to have a number 4 in that little yarn there. It's also going to tell you the recommended needle size. It's also going to tell you the recommended needle size, and it's also going to give you the recommended crochet hook size. So you can also use a crochet hook. This one recommends a size 4.5 millimeter and a size 7. So a worsted weight yarn, sometimes it'll recommend a size 7, sometimes it'll recommend an 8, sometimes it'll recommend a 9. It doesn't really matter for the project that we're doing today. This is going to come into play when you're looking at knitting patterns and you want it to match the pattern exactly. The last yarn type that I'm going to be demonstrating is this t-shirt yarn. So I just made this right before, sorry, there's hair everywhere. But I just made this t-shirt yarn like right before I did this video. I just cut up an old pajama shirt that I had because I wanted to be able to demonstrate it. This is a continuous strip of t-shirt from just, I used the bottom half of the t-shirt, but there are video tutorials for how to make a continuous strip and use the entire t-shirt. I will link that in the description because that's what I used to make this, and I'm not going to go into the how-to on making t-shirt yarn, but if you have kids that are home right now, this is a great option, the chopsticks and the t-shirt yarn, because I'm telling you, making the t-shirt yarn itself, that's a whole day. You can have them sit there and make a whole day's worth of t-shirt yarn from old shirts that are sitting in the drawers, and then give them a pair of chopsticks, show them the videos, and they can make you new dish towels and pot holders for your kitchen, and there you go, busy kids, and you're using materials from around the house. So we're really, you know, just conserving and saving and all of those things. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about in this introduction video is going to be the kind of stitches I'm going to teach. This is what I'm going to teach in the first 3 or 4 videos after this one. So the videos are going to be casting on, knitting, purling, and then knit 1, purl 1, which is ribbing. So it's gonna essentially, the videos are essentially going to teach you how to do stockinette stitch, garter stitch, and 1x1 ribbing. So I have a couple of examples of each of those stitch types, and I'm just going to talk to you about what those stitch types are. So the first one that we're going to talk about and that you're going to be able to do from the videos is garter stitch. So garter stitch consists of doing a knit row on every row. So you're only going to need to know the knit stitch. This is the most kind of basic that you'll get with knitting. All you need is knit stitch. You don't need anything fancy. The garter stitch is squishy. It's a little bit, it's in the middle in terms of thickness of the 3 that we're going to be looking at. It's really good if you're going to be doing any kind of dish towel, anything that needs like a scrubby surface. I would recommend this one if you have, like I said, if your kids are going to be making anything with the t-shirt yarn, I would recommend doing the garter stitch. Again, that's the garter stitch. So this is going to be your basic, stitch that we're going to do. The next one is stockinette. So stockinette is knit stitches on every row. So you have knits on one side, you have purls on the other. So to get stockinette when you're knitting flat, you'll have to knit a row, and then on the other side, you're gonna come back and you're gonna purl the other way. The purl is the back side of the stitch. So this is the side you're gonna knit on, and then this is the side you're gonna purl. It's not reversible. It's different on each side. People like to use this one as t-shirt fabrics. The sweater I'm wearing now, this is stockinette. The whole thing is actually stockinette except for the ribbing on the collar and the hem and the sleeves. Stockinette is, when you're knitting it flat, can be tricky just because you are knitting one row, purling the next row. When you work in the round, you only have to knit the whole time. So that's kind of the difference between it. But if you just think knits are your front, that's your regular forward stitch, and purling is just the back side of it. It's just the opposite of knitting. This is the thinnest fabric of all of them. It can make like a nice hand towel, but again, it's not reversible. So one side is gonna be your working, they call it a right side, and the other is your wrong side. The last stitch type is ribbing. So this is a 1x1 rib. And as you can see on there, and sorry that light is a little bit bright on there, but I have really bad lighting in my house. 1x1 rib is gonna be, you're gonna knit one, purl one, knit one, purl one, and then on the back side, you're gonna purl one, knit one, purl one, knit one. And basically you're always knitting into your knits and you're purling into your purls, which gives you the ribbing. Now these all had the same number cast on, and you can see lengthwise, the ribbing looks like it's much shorter. That's because it has more flexibility and it squishes up more. So it's gonna kind of squish. It's definitely the squishiest, it's the thickest. People like this, it's reversible. They like it for scarves. It's often gonna be your hems. Ribbing, just because it does have that stretch. So people use ribbing on, the hem of your shirts. They use it on your, at your sleeves, the hem, around your neckline, on socks. It's going to be the top of your socks. Your hat, it's going to be the brim of your hat. Some hats are entirely 1x1 rib. That's really a really popular hat pattern to use. It can be a tricky stitch when you're learning, just because there is a lot of backward and forward motion. You're changing your stitch every other stitch, so it can be a little confusing. It's definitely more advanced it's a more advanced beginner stitch. It's still beginner. All you need to know is knit and purl. So watch both the knitting and purling video before you go to the 1x1 ribbing video, and get a grasp on both. But yeah, that's 1x1 ribbing. So those are the 3 stitch types. Again, I'm just gonna lay them flat here for you. As you can see, the stockinette does curl up on the edges. So if you do decide to make like a scarf and stockinette, I would suggest adding like a fringe to it, because it will curl a little bit. It's just generally a curly fabric. Some people add a border to it of garter stitch, just on the first last 4 stitches. But those are the options. So decide which of these you like as you're going into the video. I would suggest just kind of doing samples of all 3 of the videos before you start like a big project, or you can just start a big project if you know you like one more than the other. The garter, for example, if you like this, just go for it and just watch the knitting video over and over and over again to make the garter scarf. And then so like I said, I'm going to do a casting on video, I'm going to do a knitting video, knit stitch video, a purl stitch video, knit one, purl one, ribbing, and then I'm going to do a binding off video. In these, I'm showing the basic cast on and the basic bind off. I'm not going to get fancy with it. I will add into the end, like I said, of the cast on video, I am going to add a little segment at the end about knitting on the circular needles. So if you do want to learn how to use circular needles, still watch the cast on video, but at the end there's just going to be a small segment about casting on onto circular needles. And I'll also show the cast on for the t-shirt yarn and chopsticks, which should be really fun. So that's it for the introduction into my series. I really hope that you keep watching and that you learn something new from this. If there's anything that you want to see from me, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments. And yeah, let me know, what you guys are interested in learning, what you're interested in making. If you have questions about different techniques, if you want to know where to get free patterns, for projects that you're interested in. Like I said, I'm just going to focus on the basics in these first couple videos, but I can always, talk about where to go to get, other, more complicated patterns once you have the basics down. So I hope you liked this video, and yeah, let me know if you are looking to learn anything else. Thank you.